Hey, hello everybody. This is Del Howison from Dark Delicacies. And I don't know when you're watching this, if you're watching it live or if you happen to be watching this later on YouTube or on the Facebook site. But this is basically our last podcast of the year, 2020. We're doing this in the middle of this crazy pandemic. You've probably heard about it. And I got a great guest on hand. I have Christopher Golden here today to talk about Red Hands, his new book, which is kind of exciting. He is, in case you don't know about him, I don't know what barrel you've been hiding under, New York Times best-selling author and a Bram Stoker award-winning writer, and has, I think this book now makes it 1.5 million books he has out. So let's bring him in. He's a really nice guy. I've known him for a day or two. So I think a couple of decades, Chris.
I think it's about that, Del. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks.
I also want to say I didn't realize this was the last one of 2020, and I appreciate being, batting cleanup. And now that 2020 is nearing its end, I'm going to fix everything.
Oh, thank goodness somebody is. At one point, we were going to, because I had been notified about your new book coming out about the same time as Jonathan's book, and we were going to have you and Mr. Mayberry on at the same time from two different locations, but there was a delay in when yours came out as opposed to his, so we decided to make two shows out of it.
Right, right. Well, I mean, I think that's good. I think that's important because Jonathan deserves his own spotlight.
Ah, that's true.
No,
Now,
listen, I want to say, too, for the record, that I know Jonathan comes in there a lot, but if I didn't live 3,000 miles away, I'd be in there weekly. So,
oh, I believe that. In fact, I heard from somebody else not too long ago. That was Amber.
yeah.
Yeah, and you've written a few things with Amber Benson, or I should say, she's written a few things with you,
Yeah.
and that's always nice. There's a really nice person right there.
Yeah, we're actually working on a secret project right now that I'm not
Well,
supposed
nobody's
to.
listening. Tell us about it.
Yeah, well, I can't say too much about it, but I will say that it's an original audio drama.
Ooh, like old time radio?
No, like podcast, like movies with your eyes closed.
Right. That's how I watch a lot of them nowadays, anyway.
Right. No, my wife does too, but when she does that, she can't hear it either.
No kidding. That's a good. It's all connected up there. So let's get your new book here talked about and out of the way. Here it is right here.
Yeah.
It's a nice looking cover. This is part of the Ben Walker series.
Yep.
And if I'm a little stutter stepping on this, you have to forgive me. The book just arrived in store yesterday, so I didn't have a chance to read the whole book yet.
Okay.
But this is book 3, I believe, in the Ben Walker series.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, out of what, about 400 series that you write?
I'm slowing down in my middle age there, Del. I don't write nearly as fast as I used to, but the Ben Walker books, Ararat came out in 2017, and then 2018 I didn't have a book out. 2019 the Pandora Room came out.
No, when you say you didn't have a book out, you mean a Ben Walker book.
I didn't have a novel out in 2018.
Wow.
And okay. I also will not have a novel out in 2021. See how, I told you, I'm slowing down. But yeah, so Pandora Room came out last year, and Red Hands is brand new this week. The interesting thing to me is that I keep trying to get across is that the books are standalone books. It is a series of books in the sense that Ben Walker is one of the featured characters in all 3 books. And, they do fall in sequence. Walker does sort of evolve as a person, as a character in the books, but you absolutely can read them. You don't have to have read the other books to read Red Hands. It's very different from the other 2. And I love it. It was, I wanted to do something different with him, and this was it.
I think it's really interesting because, like, I'm writing a character right now that's a fixer kind of character, and people have written the spy guys and all of that kind of stuff. But Ben Walker's referred to as a weird shit expert. What what is that all about?
So Walker has degrees in mythology and history and in biology, and so he over the years has worked for a small organization within DARPA, which is something like the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. That's what DARPA is, which is real. And DARPA does all this work where they are researching and developing a vast sort of array of different sciences, and always sort of weird science fiction stuff. In fact, like 90% of the time when I'm trying to find, I'm like, oh, I had this really weird idea for something to include in a book, or I need some piece of technology that I'm not aware of. I sort of Google it, and 90% of the time you find that DARPA's already researching something like it, or have already developed something like it.
Now you said DARPA is a government agency?
Yeah, DARPA in real life is a government agency, and they do a lot of that work. And so what I do is I try to bring in extra weird shit and the supernatural, and I love archaeology, so that figures in the first two books strongly. But it's sort of just this idea that, like, as we were dealing with now with COVID, here's this thing where if I'd written a story about COVID before it happened, if I'd written this story as a Ben Walker novel, starting in the wet markets in China with the things that were being eaten, it would have been, that the bats had been in some cave where there was a bacteria that hadn't been exposed to our world in, 50,000 years or a million years or whatever you want to say. And that got into the bats, and then it got into us, and then I would find some supernatural thing to connect with all of that to make it even worse, because that's what makes it fun for me. But Walker's agency actually sort of had its birth in a novel I did years ago called The Ocean Dark, which was about underwater vampires. They weren't supernatural vampires; they were sort of a heretofore undiscovered species of underwater blood drinking creatures, and that's the sort of weird shit. It goes from that to ancient viruses, and in the case of Red Hands, it involves a particular contagion that causes one person who carries it to be able to kill somebody with their touch. Basically, anybody you touch dies from being touched by you. They have about a 30-second version of bubonic plague or something like that, and they go right through it and drop dead. And there is a supernatural element to the story, but it comes in slowly, and you learn that it's a combination of things that were done in labs, ancient contagion, and something else ancient that all sort of come together in the story.
Well, the interesting thing for me in most of your writing, no matter how much supernatural is in it, no matter how weird shit experty you get, whatever, it's all about the characters and it's all about the people. It's not like this is a supernatural thing. We bring it in right away, and you're fighting the ghost, and you have to like the characters. And in yours, the focus is always on the character first.
Yeah, the thing is, like, the way I look at it is it's sort of like experiential. Like, I want you to experience what the character is experiencing. And the only way to do that is if you're identifying with them and you're on board with them. I often use this comparison, and no offense to the filmmakers, but I often rely upon a comparison between the first Conjuring film and the second one. I think the first Conjuring film is really scary. And I think it's really scary because you're really frightened about what might happen to these characters whom you have come to like. And so you're afraid for them. And then you bring in your heroes partway through that movie, but they are not your focal point. The characters who are not the heroes of the movie, the ones who are the protagonists who are being haunted.
The family with the kids.
Exactly. But once you bring in your heroes, you're not worried about them because they live. And I think that the reason that the second movie is not scary to me at all is because we start with them, and they are our vehicle into the story and into the movie. And the people who are actually in peril are secondary to them. And so, like, I'm not worried about anybody in the movie because the characters that the filmmakers have told me I'm supposed to be following are these characters I'm not afraid for because I know they live.
Right.
And I think that that's the key to, for me, a great horror story, a great adventure story of any kind. Is I want to care about these characters, and if they don't survive, I want to feel that.
No, that's very true. It's almost like when the shift came in movies. uh, Growing up, I was watching Vincent Price and Boris Karloff and all of those people in the horror movies, and then about the time of Halloween, Friday the 13th, and something, I was now moving into my 30s, and suddenly it was all filled with college kids and that age level, and I wasn't afraid, I wasn't scared. Yet
Right.
when I was a kid, if the argument is, well, kids are scared because it's kids they relate to, but when I was a kid, it was all filled with adults. And I knew if the adults were in trouble, then I should be, in fear of my life also. So it
Right.
wasn't an age thing, it was the what you could relate to
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. And you're right, in Insidious 2, you don't relate to the hunters, to the science hunter people. You
Right.
relate to the neighborhood family and the kids, and
Right.
that makes a lot of difference. Now you write across a lot of platforms. Do you do you think that is in common with all of your writing, or do you try to make that in common?
Um, that's a good question. I'm certain that it doesn't apply everywhere. I mean, especially, if you're writing a media tie-in, that the reader knows that you can't kill the characters because other people own them, and you need to put them back in the box where you found them.
Right.
But for instance, writing the Baltimore comics with Mike Mignola for Dark Horse, the characters in that, Baltimore himself, he's a character that we care about, but he's also very sort of cold, and he's also a character whose end goal is to have a peaceful death. So you're not really worried about whether he's going to live. You're worried about whether he's going to achieve his goals. But there are some other characters who are with him there who you come to care more about. And in fact, Sophia, who is one of the women, or one of the characters who is, one of his sort of team, is now getting her own comic in March, called Lady Baltimore. And I think the reason that I love her so much, and the reason that I wanted to continue her story, is exactly what we're talking about. Because unlike Baltimore, she wants to live. She has no special, special abilities. She's learned to fight really well. But she wants to live, and she has everything to live
This
for
isn't a
and to die.
superpower person.
So, yeah.
She's not a superpower person. She's just
Right, exactly. I
she's
mean,
doing
Baltimore didn't start that way, but he becomes a character who it was virtually impossible to kill until it's time,
right. So you were right. You don't have a novel coming out next year, but you have this comic coming out next year.
Yes, we have Lady Baltimore is a 5-issue miniseries from Dark Horse, and there are a bunch of other comics that I'm doing with Mike Mignola for Dark Horse that I cannot announce yet. But yeah, a lot of comic stuff. And I finished my next novel, but it won't be out until early 2022.
Also St. Martin's, or
Yeah, also for St. Martin's. Yeah.
okay. You've written, how many books are you at now? Any idea? Not counting the graphic novels, just like novels, books.
Over 100.
Crazy.
Yeah, but I think about that, and I think, Charles L. Grant did more than that. Heather Graham's done like 250 novels or something like that.
She's incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't understand how that even works. But in my case, if you go back and look at that that list, a lot of them are collaborative, and then or a lot of them are young adult, which are shorter.
Some tie-ins in there.
What's that?
You'd have some tie-ins in there
Yeah, a
also.
lot of tie-ins, and the tie-ins generally go quicker.
Right.
So I'm not, but I'm really happy with my bibliography. I mean, there's a lot of work there that I'm really proud of, and very few things that I'd like to forget. So I figure if we can get to the end of life and say that, then we're good.
That's true. I remember talking to Heather one time about her being as prolific as she is. And she told me something along the lines of, if you had to raise all those kids too without any money, you'd become prolific.
Yeah, exactly.
So do you ever worry, because now you have slowed down,
Right.
but back in the day when you were almost a machine, I think, with these books, did you ever worry about loss of quality, or what you really, if you could go back and write some of those books, there's more you'd want to do?
Look, I would say that there isn't a book I've written that that couldn't have been better. I think probably that's true of most writers, but
There isn't a book I've written that I think is finished.
yeah, exactly. There, most of them I don't want to go back and work on anymore.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that they couldn't be improved. That I couldn't have done them better. But there are only a few that I'm like, that one didn't really work, or that didn't come out well, or that one I wish I could make disappear. There are really only a few of those. But as far as that quality in that period, I think again, I'm 53, which is not old, but when I was younger, I was much more prolific, and I think also just much more able to focus on that. So really, like I look back at the body of evidence books I did, and Prowlers, those were all YA. And I love those books. I think those books came out great. And those were probably books that I wrote faster than anything that wasn't a tie-in, and even most of the tie-ins I think are actually pretty damn good. There are a couple that I wish I could erase, but most of them are pretty good. And I mean, I'm there are books that I like better than others, that I think came out better than others, but I think they would all have been improved if I'd had twice the amount of time to work on them that I did.
Or maybe not. Maybe they are just fine the way they are. I wasn't
Yeah.
trying to hint.
Again, some of them are, some of them aren't. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
there are, I wrote.
Are you? I guess it comes down to, with that body of work. Are you a outliner or are you a pantser?
I'm a combination of the two. And it varies from project to project. It also varies depending on whether it's a solo project or if I'm writing it in conjunction with somebody else. I also, a lot of times I'll outline the first, sort of like, I liken it to sort of setting up the dominoes. I can write enough of the outline that I'm setting up all the dominoes. And if you've done your job correctly, at that point, you should just be able to tip over the first domino, and then you shouldn't need to outline the rest of it. But I also find that if I outline, I'm going to change it all anyway. So,
There's things I find in writing mine that I do some of the outlining after I've written it. And it's more of, oh my God, what did I say the name of that small town was? Or what was his best friend's mailman that I mentioned and I need to mention again? Do you put things up like you can look at to find characters quickly or something?
I usually have a notebook on my desk that has a whole bunch of scribbles, and I have scraps of paper that have more scribbles, and I try to keep track of the characters and their basic descriptions. But I do change things as I go, and I find that, like, when I'm about halfway through a book, or even 2/3 of the way through a book, I'll be in the shower, or I'll be out for a walk, or on a train somewhere, and I'll actually realize what the book is really about. Maybe it's not about what I thought it was about. And then when I go back and revise, I'm pulling forward the elements that were already there that I didn't even realize I was laying out. And that to me is always the best moment in writing a novel, is when I have that epiphany, um, because it excites me, to be, oh, I guess I'm not as stupid as I thought I was because I was doing this all along.
Right, right. When you find that something you've written that you had no connection for at the time you were writing it
Right.
suddenly connects, you know.
I think so much of the time we're writing about something that's even subconsciously on our minds, thematically.
Right.
We're connecting on the story that we came up with this thematic element that we're hardly even aware of, at
That's
least for me.
true. Yeah. Well, it's also odd. I was asked to write a short story for something coming up, and I thought, okay, I mean, I have months. It wasn't like I need this right away. And suddenly I woke up in the middle of the night about a week later, and I had almost the whole first page verbatim in my head, and I had to turn the light on and write the thing out so I didn't lose it.
Hmm. Yeah, it is. I think that is um, something that happens all the time. And, again, I just like those moments of inspiration where you realize that there's a connection. It's really rewarding, and usually it ends up being some of the best stuff in any work.
Right. And I also want to remind people that you can send questions if you have any, and we will get to them as soon as they pop up here on the screen for us. In the meantime, I want to touch briefly on, excuse me, what's been going on in the publishing industry.
Yeah.
What's been happening with the monopolizing of the publishing companies. We've gone from the big six to like the big three, and now we're down to the big two with Simon and Schuster going to Penguin Random House. And I heard a comment the other day that said, the bigger the companies, the less willing they are to take risk, and also that the bigger the publisher, the blander the books. And yet, I talked to an editor the other day and said, "Nah, no, those things merging like that won't affect the writer at all." What is your feeling?
Look, I've been working in this industry for a really long time. I can't claim to know that much about the inner workings. I do feel like the fewer publishers there are, the fewer mainstream publishers there are, the more negative the impact will be on the writers. I don't know necessarily that it will have a massively negative impact on the output, on what's accessible, what the readers can get their hands on.
Is
But
it
I don't
more
know.
about what the readers can get their hands on, or what the
No, I
writer is
just feel
able to
like
have
I
authored?
feel like there will still be plenty of books. There will still be great books available. I worry about potential danger to stores. Um, and I do worry about whether there are the companies are so big now that to come in and start a new one, I can't see anybody with $1 billion going, I want to start a book publishing company.
Right.
And so it worries me because there are not outlets for a lot of different kinds of writing, or not as many as there ought to be. I feel like so I do worry about it. I do worry about it.
Do you think
Um,
that drives small press to be the ones who take the chances and who buy maybe more stuff that's edgier or that kind of a thing?
yeah,
That
I mean,
that
I do think that it drives small press. I mean, small press has been the savior of horror for years. Now horror is starting to come back in the mainstream publishing world, which I think is great. But there's so much horror out there, and even sort of thrillers and stuff like that in the small press, that's worth your time, which is great. But how to get that to a broader audience is the bigger question.
Well,
Um,
it's even getting that way for the main publishers because outside of Amazon, there's fewer and fewer and fewer bookstores, so
right.
there's fewer places for people to buy these. And my biggest problem with places like Amazon isn't the fact that they exist, but people come into my store, they come into Dark Delicacies, and I'm sure it's the same with other ones, and they browse and they discover things by browsing. and you can't really browse on something like an Amazon.
Right, but also people will come in and browse, and then they'll buy it on Amazon.
There's that, yes.
And that, so to me, it's like the message is always trying to support the brick and mortar stores, particularly the independent stores. Although more and more, even the Barnes and Nobles are becoming like independent stores now. And again, I mean, I certainly have bought many books on Amazon, but I try every time I go into an independent store to buy a couple of books in there, because I want to try to make sure I support the indie stores. It's just important because I want that browsing experience, Dell. I mean, that's like the number one thing I miss about the two things I miss about being trapped in my house all the time in the middle of COVID, not being able to sit in a movie theater and watch a movie on the big screen, and not being able to go and browse in a bookstore and discover something that I would never have found otherwise.
That's true. I discovered News of the World, which is probably the best book I read that year, a couple of years ago, and one of the best Westerns I've ever read. And now I'm delighted to see it comes out in December as a film with Tom Hanks. So
Right.
I'm kind of excited for that. We have a couple of questions that have popped up. If you
Yep.
want to, one says, is Bloodstained Wonderland still in the works, or is it with a publisher? Tell me what Bloodstained Wonderland is first.
Okay, so many years ago, James A. Moore, and I wrote a novella called Bloodstained Oz, which I think was nominated for the Stoker that year, which was nice. And we always intended it to be the first book in a trilogy. The second book, Bloodstained Wonderland, actually came out last year or the beginning of this year. I can't remember which, last year or this year. From Earthling Publications, who published the Bloodstained Oz many years ago. And Jim and I are currently working on Bloodstained Neverland, which is the last book in the trilogy, which hopefully will be out by the end of next year.
So that will complete your trilogy for you.
Yes, it will complete the trilogy. And what we keep promising is, despite Jim's cancer and all the other things that have come along, it will. I think it took us at least 12 years or something to get to the second one, but we're definitely not going to have that happen this time. We're in progress on this third book, and it should be out by the end of next year.
If it comes out by the end of next year, you will have a book out.
And not a novel.
Oh, well, that's
a novella. It doesn't count.
Oh, okay. We have a question from Delphina who says, dream of your characters from books as if they are living and you've interacted with them.
I've never dreamed about them after I've started writing them.
Really?
But I have had dreams that have begun stories. So that I've my novel Wildwood Road, the first 4 chapters of Wildwood Road are a dream I had, and I woke up from that dream and I wrote down notes to sort of so that I would not forget it. So if you read Wildwood Road, the first 3 or 4 chapters are basically the dream.
Is that the first time that's happened?
That was the first time that happened, but I definitely have included other dreams in one of the Prowler's novels. I included the events of a terrible nightmare that I had, the most terrifying. I don't think I've ever been more frightened in my life than that. And so, yeah, but yeah, so I don't, I did once dream I was Green Arrow. Yeah, I still have very clear memory of that. So,
well, let's put the book up here again for you. It is Red Hands. It just came out this week, and it is one of the Walker books. It's not part of a series. The character has been in other books. That's probably the best way to say it, huh?
Yes, exactly. Yep.
Okay. And it's available everywhere. We hope you buy it at Dark Delicacies, but you know what? It's more important to us that you buy it. That's what makes the difference.
Well, listen, it's important to me that they buy it too, but I would love it if they bought it at Dark Delicacies, one of my favorite stores in the world. And they do have signed book plates to go on the book.
Yes, we do. So you will get a signed copy in essence, because Chris, before they ship this out, put his hand inside every box of books and touched them.
Yeah.
So, but thanks for being here today. I
Thanks
really,
for having
really
me, Bill.
appreciate it.
It's great to see
And
your face.
yeah, yeah, it's been a while. It's
Yeah.
been a while. And let's do it again, maybe next year. What's before we go, what is the thing you're looking forward the most to next year?
Um, I look, the real answer to that question is just more opportunities to go to places with my family, to go hiking, to climb some mountains with my wife, um, and just be outside more, to not feel trapped, to go sit in the movie theater,
Yes.
um, which is the opposite of being outside, but I'm looking forward to that. Um, and just that, like, to go someplace warm. Maybe I'll come visit you.
Oh, please do. We're warm here most of the time, sometimes too warm. So I wish you my best for a future of many more books and many more treats for the rest of us. And thanks for coming out. Red Hands by Christopher Golden. Thank you again.
Thanks, Del.
Bye
Thanks,
bye.
everyone.